Nicole, a young black, beautiful 28-years-old girl, pretends to be a maid in the hotel she inherited from her grandfather. She tolerated maltreatment from the general manager for more than 2 years, and finally one day, on the event hosted in the hotel to celebrate hometown heroes, she took the mic and revealed her identity and secret. Imagine yourself being in this kind of situation. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be invisible in plain sight? To watch someone destroy your life's work while they smile in your face? Nicole Harrington knew that feeling intimately. For over 2 years, this brilliant 28-year-old black woman scrubbed toilets and endured daily humiliation at Charleston's most prestigious hotel. Her cruel manager, James Wellington, treated her like dirt beneath his expensive shoes, never suspecting the shocking truth that would change everything. You see, Nicole wasn't just any housekeeping staff. She was the secret owner of the entire Grand Heritage Hotel, inherited from her grandfather who built it with his bare hands. And on one unforgettable night, when Charleston's elite gathered to celebrate their hometown heroes, Nicole decided it was time to stop hiding and reclaim what was rightfully hers. What happened next will leave you speechless. Before we continue to explore what really happened, please do me a favor to subscribe to this channel. Your support is what inspires me to bring you more wonderful stories every day. I believe you have subscribed. Now relax and enjoy the story. The brass nameplate on the mahogany desk read, James Wellington, General Manager, in elegant script, but the man behind it was anything but elegant at 6:30 in the morning. His tie hung loose, his shirt wrinkled from another late night reviewing profit margins that never seemed high enough for the mysterious owners he'd never met in 3 years of running the Grand Heritage Hotel. James stabbed at his keyboard, pulling up staff schedules with the irritation of a man who believed management meant controlling every breath his employees took. The Grand Heritage wasn't just any hotel. It was Charleston's crown jewel, a restored antebellum mansion that attracted senators, celebrities, and old Southern money. Every detail mattered, every service had to be flawless, and every staff member needed to understand their place in his carefully orchestrated machine. Worthless, he muttered, scanning the housekeeping reports. Room 237 had a complaint about slow service yesterday. Again, he'd spoken to that girl. What was her name? Nicole something, twice this month about her pace. These people didn't understand that excellence required sacrifice, that the Grand Heritage's 5-star rating hung on every perfectly folded towel and every spotless mirror. James straightened his tie and checked his Rolex. The owner's quarterly review was in 2 weeks, submitted remotely as always through their lawyer. His promotion to regional director depended on these numbers, on proving he could squeeze every ounce of profit from this place while maintaining the service standards that kept the wealthy clientele coming back. He picked up his phone to call housekeeping. Someone needed to understand that mediocrity wasn't acceptable at the Grand Heritage. 3 floors above, Nicole's hands moved with practiced efficiency through her morning routine, each motion carrying the weight of ritual. She'd been awake since 5, as she had been every day for the past 2 years and 4 months. Not because housekeeping required it, but because these quiet moments belonged to her, the only time she could walk these halls as herself, not as the invisible girl in the gray uniform. She paused at the portrait hanging in the 3rd-floor hallway, her grandfather's eyes meeting hers across decades. Theodore Harrington had built the Grand Heritage with his own hands and dreams, back when a black man owning prime Charleston real estate was revolutionary, dangerous, and magnificent all at once. His weathered face in the painting held the same determined set of jaws she saw in her mirror each morning. "Morning, Granddaddy," she whispered, touching the gold locket at her throat, his final gift, containing his photo and the deed that made her the true owner of everything James Wellington thought he controlled. Nicole adjusted her housekeeping uniform, the gray fabric rough against skin that should have been draped in silk. She'd worn these clothes for over 2 years, enduring James's condescension, his barely concealed disdain, his assumption that she was just another girl who needed this job to pay rent. If he only knew that every paycheck he signed came from her own inheritance, every order he barked was directed at the woman who could fire him with a word. But proving herself worthy of Granddaddy's trust meant more than just revealing a deed. It meant understanding every corner of his dream, every challenge his legacy faced. So she cleaned toilets and changed sheets and bit her tongue when James spoke to her like she was nothing, all while learning the hotel's heartbeat from the inside. The grandfather clock in the lobby chimed 7 times, and Nicole's morning grace period ended. She became invisible again, another face in gray meant to serve without being seen. Her phone buzzed. A text from James, housekeeping meeting, conference room. Now. Nicole closed her eyes, drew strength from her grandfather's painted gaze, and headed downstairs to face another day of pretending she didn't own every brick beneath her feet. Have you ever wondered what it costs to hide who you really are, and whether the person treating you poorly would change if they knew your true identity? The conference room felt smaller with James's anger filling every corner. Nicole stood with the other housekeeping staff, Maria, Patricia, and young Destiny, their eyes fixed on the polished table, while James paced like a caged animal. The Charleston Chamber of Commerce is hosting their annual Hometown Heroes celebration here next Friday, James announced, his voice sharp as broken glass. 500 guests. Mayor Richardson, Senator Davis, business leaders, war veterans, people who matter. People who can make or break this hotel's reputation. He stopped pacing and fixed his gaze on Nicole. Which is why I will not, tolerate the sloppiness I've been seeing from this department. Nicole's fingers tightened around her cleaning supplies cart handle. She knew what was coming. Room 237 complained yesterday about slow service. The Pemberton suite had streaks on the bathroom mirror on Tuesday. And don't get me started on the thread count issue in the executive wing. His eyes never left Nicole's face. These problems seem to cluster around certain staff members who apparently think their job is optional. The air in the room grew thick. Nicole felt her co-workers shift uncomfortably, their solidarity fragile against James's targeted wrath. She'd taken extra time in room 237 because the elderly guest had seemed lonely, needed someone to listen while she talked about her late husband. The mirror in the Pemberton suite had been clean. James was inventing flaws now. Sir, Nicole said quietly, if you could tell me specifically which. Don't. James's voice cracked like a whip. Don't stand there and make excuses. I've had it with your attitude, with your constant need to question every directive. This is a business, not a charity case for people who think showing up is enough. The words hit Nicole like physical blows. Around the table, she could feel her co-workers' embarrassment for her, their relief that they weren't the target. Maria stared at her hands. Patricia bit her lip. Destiny looked like she might cry. James leaned forward, his knuckles white against the table. You want to know what's going to happen? For the Hometown Heroes event, I'm assigning you to toilet duty. All weekend. Every bathroom in this hotel will be your responsibility. Maybe scrubbing where people's waste goes will remind you of your actual value here. The silence that followed was deafening. Nicole felt something crack inside her chest, not her heart, but something deeper. The careful composure she'd maintained for over 2 years began to fray at the edges. And if I find one complaint about cleanliness that weekend, James continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow seemed louder than shouting, you're done. Fired. No references, no severance, nothing. Do I make myself clear? Nicole's hand moved instinctively to her locket, feeling the weight of her grandfather's photo against her palm. In her mind, she could hear his voice from childhood visits. Baby girl, sometimes folks will try to make you forget who you are. But your worth doesn't come from their opinions, it comes from God and your own heart. She looked up at James, really looked at him. Saw the insecurity masked as authority, the desperation dressed up as power. This man was running her grandfather's hotel, living off her inheritance, building his career on her family's legacy, and he was telling her she belonged with toilets and waste. Crystal clear, Nicole said, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. But something had shifted. As James dismissed the meeting with a wave of his hand, as her co-workers filed out with apologetic glances, Nicole remained standing. She watched James gather his papers, straighten his tie, check his expensive watch, all the little rituals of a man who believed he was untouchable. "Sir," she said. He looked up, irritated. "What now?" "The Hometown Heroes event. Will you be making remarks that evening?" James's chest puffed with pride. "Of course. I'll be introducing the honorees, representing the grand heritage." "Why?" Nicole nodded slowly. "Just wondering. It sounds like an important night." "The most important night of the year," James said, already dismissing her as he turned back to his papers. "For those of us who understand what really matters." Nicole walked to the door, then paused. "Mr. Wellington?" "What?" "I hope you get everything you deserve that night." James didn't look up. "I always do." As Nicole walked down the hallway, her hands trembling slightly, she felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in over 2 years, righteous anger. Not the hot, destructive kind, but the cold, purposeful fury that her grandfather had taught her was the companion of justice. Friday was 8 days away. 8 days of toilet duty, of humiliation, of pretending she belonged in the shadows of her own legacy. But Friday was also the night Charleston would celebrate its heroes. And Nicole was finally ready to remind everyone, especially James Wellington, what a real hero looked like. Nicole's apartment above Sullivan's Bakery was nothing like the penthouse she could have afforded. The one-bedroom space with its creaking floors and temperamental radiator had been her choice, a deliberate decision to live modestly while she learned her grandfather's business from the ground up. Tonight, surrounded by the scent of tomorrow's bread rising downstairs, she sat at her small kitchen table with papers spread before her like battle plans. The hotel's quarterly reports, staff schedules, guest satisfaction surveys, documents she'd quietly copied over months of late-night access to James's office. She told herself it was research, due diligence, preparation for the day she'd step into her rightful place. But tonight, staring at the financial projections James would submit to the owners next week, Nicole felt the walls of her careful plan crumbling. Her phone rang. Maria's name flashed on the screen. "Mija, you okay?" Maria's voice carried 2 decades of mothering instinct. "That man was brutal today." "I'm fine," Nicole lied, turning over a page that showed James had been skimming profits through inflated vendor contracts. Her grandfather's hotel was being bled dry by the man she'd trusted to run it. "No, you're not fine. Nobody's fine after that." Maria sighed. "Listen, my cousin Rosa works at the Marriott downtown. She says they're hiring." "You don't have to take this, Nicole. There are other jobs." "Other jobs?" Nicole almost laughed. She could walk into any hotel in Charleston tomorrow and buy it outright. But leaving would mean abandoning her grandfather's legacy to James's greed and incompetence. "I can't quit, Maria." "Not yet." "Why? What's keeping you there?" "That place is poison, and James Wellington is the worst kind of poison, the kind that makes you think you deserve it." Nicole closed her eyes. How could she explain that every day of humiliation was gathering evidence? That she was documenting James's failures and corruption for the moment, when she'd need to justify his termination to the hotel's board of directors? That quitting would mean letting him destroy everything her grandfather had built? "It's complicated," she said finally. "Complicated how?" "Nicole, you're smart. You work harder than anyone I know, and you've got more dignity in your little finger than James has in his whole body. What's really keeping you there?" The truth sat on Nicole's tongue like a stone. "Because I own it. Because every paycheck he signs is written against my inheritance. Because I'm gathering proof of what he really is before I destroy his career the same way he's been trying to destroy my spirit. I need to see something through." Maria was quiet for a long moment. "You're planning something." It wasn't a question. Nicole's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Nicole Harrington, I've known you for 2 years. You think I don't see how you watch everything, how you remember every detail. You think I don't notice how you never complain about money, but you know more about this hotel than girls who've been cleaning rooms since before you were born. Nicole's breath caught. Has she been that obvious? And another thing, Maria continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. I've been working at the Grand Heritage for 15 years. You know whose picture hangs in that third-floor hallway? Theodore Harrington. Built that hotel with his bare hands back in the 70s. And you know what, Mija? You got his eyes. Same stubborn set to your jaw, too. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Nicole felt exposed, her carefully constructed cover story dissolving under Maria's maternal intuition. Maria, I don't need you to tell me nothing you're not ready to tell. But whatever you're planning for that hero's night, whatever you're waiting for, just remember that some of us are watching out for you. And some of us have been waiting a long time to see James Wellington get what's coming to him. After Maria hung up, Nicole sat in her kitchen holding the phone like a lifeline. Her secret felt less solid now, more fragile. If Maria could see through her disguise, who else might have suspicions? She picked up the deed from her grandfather's papers, the legal document that made her the sole owner of the Grand Heritage Hotel. For over 2 years, she'd kept it locked away, telling herself she needed more time to prepare, more evidence to justify her eventual revelation. But James's cruelty today had crossed a line. Toilet duty during the hero's celebration wasn't just professional humiliation. It was personal degradation designed to break her spirit. And his financial manipulations were stealing from her grandfather's legacy every day she waited. Nicole folded the deed carefully and slipped it into her locket alongside her grandfather's photo. The gold felt heavier against her chest, weighted with decisions she could no longer postpone. Friday was 6 days away. 6 days of playing the invisible maid while James prepared his grand performance as the hotel's distinguished representative. 6 days to decide whether she was ready to stop hiding and start fighting for what was rightfully hers. Outside her window, Charleston's historic district glowed under streetlights, the city her grandfather had loved enough to build a legacy in. Nicole pressed her palm against the cool glass and made a promise to his memory. No more hiding. No more shame. It was time to come home. The burst pipe in the executive wing couldn't have come at a worse time. Or perhaps, Nicole thought as she watched James pace frantically outside the flooded presidential suite, it was perfectly timed by the universe's sense of justice. For days, James shouted into his phone, his polished composure cracking like ice in spring. The hero's celebration is in 4 days, and half my premium suites are underwater. Nicole stood beside her industrial vacuum, officially there to extract water from Persian rugs that cost more than most people's cars. Unofficially, she was watching James Wellington come apart at the seams, and discovering that his desperation revealed more about his character than his confidence ever had. No, I cannot move Senator Davis to a standard room. James snapped at whoever was unfortunate enough to be on the other end of the call. Do you understand what this event means? The mayor, 3 congressmen, the entire Charleston elite. This is not the time for your excuses. The emergency had started at dawn when the century-old pipes in the west wall finally surrendered to decades of deferred maintenance. By the time maintenance shut off the water, 6 suites were flooded, including the presidential suite where Senator Davis was supposed to stay during the hero's weekend. Nicole knew about the pipe issues. She'd found the maintenance reports buried in James's files weeks ago, recommendations for replacement that he'd ignored to pad his quarterly profits. Now his penny pinching was threatening the very event he'd been planning like a coronation. Miss Nicole, James said, suddenly noticing her presence. He never bothered learning her last name. How long will this take? Nicole looked at the water-soaked carpets, the damaged furniture, the walls that would need days to properly dry. If we work around the clock, maybe ready by Saturday morning, but the humidity. Saturday morning? James's face flushed red. The event starts Friday evening. Sir, I can't control physics. Water damage takes time to. Don't tell me about time. James threw his phone onto a soggy armchair. Do you have any idea what this means? Senator Davis's people specifically requested the presidential suite. The mayor expects the Lincoln Room. These aren't people you disappoint. Nicole watched him sink into crisis mode, and something unexpected happened. She saw him as human for the first time. Not the controlled tyrant who'd been tormenting her, but a man whose entire career was balanced on the edge of disaster. It didn't excuse his cruelty, but it explained his desperation. What if we move the VIPs to the Magnolia Wing? She suggested quietly. James looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. The Magnolia Wing is being renovated. The renovation is cosmetic, new wallpaper and fixtures. The rooms are functional. We could focus our efforts there, make them perfect instead of trying to save everything. For a moment, James stared at her with something resembling surprise. You know about the renovation schedule? Nicole's pulse quickened. She knew because she'd approved the renovation budget in her secret correspondence with the hotel's lawyers. I pay attention to things. James was quiet, calculating. Around them, the sound of industrial fans and dehumidifiers filled the silence. Finally, he nodded. Show me. For the next 3 hours, Nicole found herself in the surreal position of consulting with the man who'd humiliated her just days before. They walked through the Magnolia Wing together, assessing what could be completed in 4 days. James took notes while Nicole pointed out details, which rooms had the best views, where the renovation was furthest along, how they could rearrange the layout to accommodate the VIP guest security requirements. How do you know about security protocols? James asked, pausing mid-stride. Nicole's heart hammered. Because I've been researching every aspect of this business for 2 years. Because I've read every manual, every policy, every procedure that governs this hotel. Because this is mine, and I know it better than you do. I watch. I listen. You pick things up, she said instead. Something shifted in James's expression. Not kindness, he wasn't capable of that toward her, but a grudging recognition of competence. You're more observant than I gave you credit for. It wasn't an apology, but coming from James Wellington, it felt like one. They worked until evening, Nicole providing solutions while James claimed credit for them in his calls to vendors and city officials. She watched him operate, saw how he charmed suppliers, bullied contractors, and smoothed ruffled feathers with promises and threats in equal measure. He was good at his job when the crisis forced him to focus beyond his own ego. We might actually pull this off, James said as they surveyed the transformed Magnolia Wing. 3 rooms were now pristine. 2 more would be ready by Thursday night. Nicole nodded, exhausted but oddly satisfied. For one day, she'd worked alongside him as something approaching an equal. It reminded her why she'd hidden her identity in the first place, to understand the hotel from every angle, to earn respect through competence rather than inheritance. Nicole, James said as they prepared to leave. Her name sounded different in his mouth, less dismissive, more human. Sir? Tomorrow, I want you working on the Magnolia Wing exclusively. No toilet duty. We need your... He struggled with the words. Your attention to detail up there. It wasn't an apology for his earlier cruelty. It wasn't recognition of her true position. But it was acknowledgement that she had value beyond his narrow assumptions. Thank you, sir, Nicole said, meaning it and hating herself for meaning it. As they walked toward the elevator, Nicole realized something had fundamentally changed between them. The dynamic was still unequal, still built on lies and hidden truths. But for the first time, James had seen her as a person capable of solving problems rather than creating them. It made what she planned to do on Friday night infinitely more complicated. The discovery happened by accident, the way truth often does when it's tired of hiding. Nicole was working alone in the presidential suite, trying to salvage a water-damaged antique writing desk, when she noticed something odd about the wood paneling behind it. Years of water exposure had loosened one of the panels, revealing a narrow gap. Her fingers, guided by curiosity and 2 years of intimate familiarity with every corner of this hotel, found the hidden catch. The panel swung open to reveal a small safe built into the wall. Nicole's breath caught. She'd found her grandfather's private safe, the one mentioned in his journals but never located after his death. The combination lock looked untouched by time, waiting with mechanical patience for someone who knew Theodore Harrington's secrets. Her grandfather's birthday. The numbers clicked into place like destiny. Inside, Nicole found treasures that made her heart ache. Photographs of her grandmother in her wedding dress, standing in front of the hotel when it was newly built. Letters from city officials who'd tried to force Theodore to sell, their racist threats barely concealed behind legal language. And at the bottom, a leather journal she'd never seen before. She opened it with trembling hands. July 15th, 1987, they think I'll break. Mayor Richardson's boy came by again today, making offers that sound like ultimatums. Says the city's changing, that my kind would be more comfortable elsewhere. Told him my grandfather was born in Charleston when his family was still property, and I'll be damned if I let some white boy with soft hands tell me where I belong. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. Her grandfather's voice, fierce and uncompromising, spoke to her across decades. August 3rd, 1987. Hired James Wellington today. Sharp young man, ambitious. Reminds me of myself at that age, hungry to prove himself. White folks feel comfortable with him, which might help shield this place from the worst of their prejudice. Lord knows I'm tired of fighting every battle alone. The journal entries continued through the years, documenting her grandfather's struggles to maintain the hotel's reputation while facing constant pressure to sell. Nicole read about loan officers who lost his applications, suppliers who suddenly raised prices, inspectors who found violations that mysteriously disappeared when competitors faced the same scrutiny. But Theodore Harrington had persevered, building alliances with Charleston's black business community, earning respect through excellence that couldn't be denied. The Grand Heritage became a symbol of what was possible when determination met opportunity. March 12, 1998, Nicole turns 8 today. Brought her to see the hotel, showed her the portraits in the 3rd floor hallway. She asked why there weren't any pictures of people who looked like her and Granddaddy. Smart girl. Told her someday there would be. Someday she'd understand that this place isn't just a business. It's proof that we belong here, that we can build something lasting and beautiful. Nicole's tears fell onto the yellowed pages. She remembered that day, remembered her grandfather's calloused hand in hers as they walked through rooms that seemed impossibly grand to her 8-year-old eyes. June 18, 2019. The doctors say I have 6 months, maybe less. James has been asking about the ownership transfer, assuming I'll leave everything to the city or some charitable foundation. He doesn't know about Nicole, doesn't know I've been watching her grow into the woman this place needs. She's strong like her grandmother, smart like her mother, stubborn like me. But she's also kind in ways I never learned to be. Maybe that's what this place needs, someone who can lead with both strength and grace. The final entry was dated just weeks before his death. November 30th, 2019, sign the papers today. Everything goes to Nicole, but she doesn't know yet. Told the lawyers to wait 2 years before contacting her. Give her time to finish college and decide what she wants from life. If she chooses to claim her inheritance, she'll need to be ready for the fight that comes with it. James won't go quietly. He's built his identity around running this place. The city officials who've been circling like vultures will double their pressure once they realize a young black woman owns prime Charleston real estate. But if she's half the woman I think she is, she'll be ready for all of them. I pray she knows that she doesn't have to prove herself worthy of this legacy. She was born worthy. The question isn't whether she deserves what I've built. The question is whether this place deserves her. Nicole closed the journal and held it against her chest, her grandfather's love washing over her like benediction. For 2 years, she'd been trying to earn something that was already hers, seeking approval from people whose opinions didn't matter. She thought about James, working frantically to save an event that would showcase his competence to owners he'd never met. The irony was almost cruel. He was performing for her, begging for approval from the woman he'd been treating like garbage. But the journal revealed something else. Her grandfather had seen potential in James once, and had hoped he might be an ally rather than an obstacle. That young, ambitious man still existed somewhere beneath the arrogance and prejudice, perhaps waiting for the right moment to emerge. Friday was 2 days away. 2 days to decide not just whether to reveal her identity, but how to do it in a way that honored her grandfather's memory and created the future he'd envisioned for the grand heritage. Nicole carefully returned everything to the safe except the journal. That she would keep close, her grandfather's final gift and guidance for the battle ahead. Standing in the water-damaged suite that James was scrambling to repair, Nicole finally understood what her grandfather had been trying to teach her. She didn't need to prove she was worthy of respect. She needed to demand it. Thursday evening arrived with the soft golden light that made Charleston's historic district look like a painting. Nicole found herself working alongside James in the Magnolia Wing, putting finishing touches on rooms that would host the city's most powerful people tomorrow night. The crisis had stripped away their usual formalities, leaving behind something unexpectedly comfortable. Two people united by shared purpose. "Hand me that lamp," James said, adjusting the placement of furniture in the renovated Lincoln room. Gone was his usual commanding tone, replaced by the easy collaboration that had developed over the past 2 days. Nicole passed him the antique brass lamp, their fingers brushing briefly. For the first time since she'd known him, James looked genuinely relaxed. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, his usual armor of corporate authority set aside in favor of practical work. "You know," James said, stepping back to survey their handiwork, "I owe you an apology." Nicole's heart skipped. "Sir?" "James. Just James tonight." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "What I said in that meeting earlier this week, about your value, about toilet duty, it was cruel. Unnecessary." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither had expected to build. Nicole felt the weight of her grandfather's journal in her bag, the truth of her identity pressing against her chest like a physical force. "I've been under pressure," James continued, not quite meeting her eyes. "The owners, the board, everyone expects perfection while I'm trying to run a hotel that's falling apart from deferred maintenance. But that's not your fault, and I took it out on you because you were an easy target." Nicole's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" James was quiet for a long moment, adjusting and readjusting the lamp's position. "Because these past 2 days, working with you, you've shown me things about this place I never noticed. You see solutions where I see problems. You care about details that I'd overlook. And you never once threw my earlier behavior back in my face, even though you had every right to." He finally looked at her directly, and Nicole saw something she'd never seen before, genuine respect mixed with what might have been shame. "I've been managing this hotel for 3 years, James said. But you understand it. There's a difference." Nicole felt tears threatening. This was the James Wellington her grandfather had hired, the young man with potential who'd been buried under years of corporate climbing and defensive prejudice. She wanted to tell him everything, about the journal, about her grandfather's faith in him, about the second chance that was still possible. "James," she said softly, "what do you love about this place?" The question surprised him. He looked around the elegant room with its restored crown molding and carefully chosen antiques. "I don't know if love is the right word. This hotel is my career, my reputation. It's what I've built my life around." "That's not what I asked." James was quiet, considering. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, more honest. "There's a moment every morning, just before the staff arrives, when I walk through the lobby and everything is perfect. The light hits the chandelier just right, the mahogany glows like honey, and you can almost hear the history in the walls. For just a minute, it feels like I'm part of something bigger than quarterly reports and profit margins. Nicole's heart ached. That was exactly how she felt during her early morning visits to her grandfather's portrait. My grandfather used to bring me here when I was little, she found herself saying. He'd tell me stories about the people who'd stayed here, the history these walls had witnessed. He said buildings like this were love letters to the future, proof that beauty and excellence could endure. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man, James said. What did he do? The truth balanced on Nicole's tongue like a confession. He believed in creating something lasting, something that would matter long after he was gone. James nodded thoughtfully. The owners of this place, whoever they are, must have had that same vision. I've never met them, but their standards are uncompromising. Sometimes I wonder if I'm living up to what they intended. Nicole's breath caught. The vulnerability in his voice, the genuine uncertainty. This was a man questioning everything he thought he knew about himself and his purpose. I think, Nicole said carefully, that they would want someone who cares about more than just numbers. Someone who sees the morning light in the lobby and understands what it means. James smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. You have a poet's soul, Nicole. That's rare in this business. They worked in comfortable silence for another hour, adding final touches that transformed the renovated rooms from merely acceptable to truly special. Nicole found herself watching James's hands as he adjusted a picture frame, noting the care he took with details when his defenses were down. Tomorrow's going to be chaos, James said as they prepared to leave. The hero's ceremony, all those VIPs, the mayor's speech. But we did good work here. Whatever happens, we gave them something worthy of the occasion. Nicole nodded, her heart heavy with unspoken truths. James? Yeah. Tomorrow night, when you're introducing the honorees, remember what you said about that morning light in the lobby. Lead with that, not with the quarterly reports. James looked puzzled but nodded. I'll try. As they walked toward the elevator together, Nicole realized that for the first time in over 2 years, she genuinely liked the man beside her. The revelation she'd been planning suddenly felt less like justice and more like betrayal, not of her grandfather's memory, but of this fragile connection they'd built. Tomorrow would change everything between them. The question was whether it would destroy what they'd found or make it stronger. The hometown heroes celebration was everything James had promised. Charleston's elite gathered in glittering splendor, champagne flowing like water. The Grand Heritage Hotel transformed into a stage for the city's most powerful to celebrate their own magnanimity. Nicole moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible in her server's uniform, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres while watching James work the room with practiced charm. He looked magnificent in his tailored tuxedo, every inch the distinguished hotel manager introducing mayors and senators, his earlier vulnerability replaced by polished confidence. This was James Wellington at his best, articulate, commanding, the perfect representative of Southern hospitality and old-world elegance. Nicole had planned to wait until the ceremony's climax to reveal herself. Had imagined the perfect moment when she'd step forward and reclaim her grandfather's legacy with dignity and grace. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Excuse me, miss. The voice belonged to Mayor Richardson, a man whose family had tried to force her grandfather to sell decades earlier. Could you bring more of those crab cakes to the VIP section? Nicole nodded, balancing her tray as she navigated toward the area where Charleston's most prominent citizens held court. She was nearly there when she heard James's voice rise above the dinner conversation, animated and confident. Absolutely transformed this place's profit margins, he was saying to a circle of impressed businessmen. When I took over 3 years ago, the previous management was, let's say, less focused on fiscal responsibility. Nicole's steps slowed. Something cold began forming in her stomach. The challenge with heritage properties, James continued, warming to his theme, is that the original owners often prioritize sentiment over sound business practices. Fortunately, The current owners understand the value of professional management. Senator Davis leaned forward with interest. Have you met them? The owners? James smiled with practiced mystery. They prefer to remain anonymous, conduct business through lawyers. Probably old Charleston family money. You know how they are about publicity. But they're smart enough to let experienced professionals handle the day-to-day operations. Nicole's tray trembled in her hands. The mayor's wife noticed her hesitation and waved dismissively. The crab cakes, dear. Don't just stand there. But Nicole couldn't move. She watched James accept congratulations for turning around her grandfather's legacy, for modernizing a business that had been successful for decades before his arrival. The man who'd apologized to her just yesterday was now rewriting history, erasing Theodore Harrington's achievements and claiming them as his own. Of course, James continued, his voice carrying easily across the room, you have to be firm with certain types of employees. Some people think showing up is enough, that they're entitled to positions they haven't earned. But excellence requires standards, requires people who understand their place in the hierarchy. Nicole's vision blurred with rage and betrayal. His words from yesterday, about her value, about seeing solutions where he saw problems, had been lies. Pretty words to manipulate her into helping him save his precious event. James is being modest, Mayor Richardson interjected with a laugh. From what I hear, he's had to deal with some real challenges in the staff department. Isn't that right, James? Didn't you mention having to discipline one of the housekeeping girls just this week? The laughter that followed was cruel, casual, the sound of people who'd never worked a day of service in their lives enjoying someone else's humiliation. Nicole felt every eye in the room sliding past her, through her, around her, the invisible servant girl whose degradation was dinner party entertainment. Nothing I couldn't handle, James replied smoothly. Sometimes people need to be reminded of their proper place. It's actually a kindness, saves them from embarrassing themselves by reaching above their station. The words hit Nicole like physical blows. Her grandfather's journal burned in her memory, his pride in building something lasting, his belief that she was born worthy, his faith that James could be better than this. And here was James, in the hotel Theodore Harrington had built with his own hands, using her humiliation as a punchline while accepting credit for another man's life work. Nicole's hands shook so violently that glasses began sliding off her tray. The crash when they hit the marble floor was deafening in the elegant room, champagne and crystal fragments exploding across polished shoes and designer gowns. The conversation stopped. Every face turned toward her with varying degrees of annoyance and disdain. In the sudden silence, Nicole heard the grandfather clock in the lobby chiming 9 times, the same clock that had marked time during her grandfather's morning walks, during her childhood visits, during 2 years of hidden servitude. Clumsy girl, someone muttered. This is exactly what I mean, James said, his voice carrying that old contempt she remembered from the conference room. The vulnerability of yesterday was gone, replaced by the cruel manager performing for his audience. Some people simply aren't suited for refined environments. Nicole looked up from the broken glass to find James staring at her with cold embarrassment, as if her existence was a personal affront to his professional reputation. The man who'd worked beside her, who'd shared his insecurities and dreams, had vanished completely. In his place stood a stranger who saw her as nothing more than a problem to be managed, a servant who'd forgotten her place. Clean that up, James ordered, his voice sharp with authority. And next time, try to remember that this isn't the place for your usual carelessness. The cruelty of it, the casual dismissal after their shared moments of connection, the public humiliation in front of people who would never see her as human, shattered something fundamental inside Nicole's chest. Not her heart, but her faith in the possibility of redemption, in the hope that people could choose to be better than their worst impulses. She straightened slowly, broken glass crunching under her feet, and looked directly into James Wellington's eyes. You're absolutely right, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Some people don't know their proper place. And Nicole Harrington smiled. The silence that followed Nicole's smile stretched like a held breath. She stood in the center of the elegant ballroom, surrounded by broken glass and Charleston's finest, feeling the weight of 2 years of hidden truth pressing against her chest like a living thing. James stared at her with growing unease. Something in her expression, calm, certain, almost serene, didn't match the subservient Maid he thought he knew. Around them, the crowd waited with the uncomfortable tension of people witnessing a scene they couldn't quite understand, but knew was significant. "Well," James said, his voice sharp with authority that suddenly felt hollow. "Are you going to clean up this mess, or do I need to call maintenance?" Nicole looked down at the shattered champagne glasses, their fragments catching the light from the crystal chandeliers her grandfather had installed 40 years ago. How fitting, she thought, that her moment of truth should begin with something broken. "You know," Nicole said conversationally, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed room, "my grandfather always said that broken things could be beautiful if you knew how to look at them properly." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. James's frown deepened. "What are you talking about?" "Just clean up the glass." Nicole ignored him, instead reaching into her uniform pocket to withdraw her grandfather's leather journal. The worn binding felt warm in her hands, solid with the weight of history and truth. "Theodore Harrington wrote in this journal for 30 years, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He documented every challenge he faced building this hotel, every obstacle thrown in his path by people who thought a black man had no business owning prime Charleston real estate." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mayor Richardson's face had gone pale, while Senator Davis leaned forward with sudden sharp attention. James looked bewildered, as if Nicole had started speaking a foreign language. "What does this have to do with?" James began. "Everything," Nicole said, her eyes never leaving his face. "You see, Mr. Wellington, my grandfather wrote about you too. About the young, ambitious man he hired 3 years ago. He had such hopes for you." The realization was dawning in James's eyes now, creeping across his features like sunrise. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Nicole opened the journal to a marked page. July 12th, 2019. "James has potential, but he's let ambition cloud his judgment. He sees the hotel as a stepping stone rather than a legacy. I worry that without proper guidance, he'll become the kind of man who takes credit for other people's work and looks down on people he thinks are beneath him." She closed the journal and looked directly at James, who had turned white as the starched tablecloths around them. "Granddaddy was hoping you'd prove him wrong," Nicole said softly. "Right up until he died, he believed you could be better than your worst impulses." "Your grandfather?" James's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Theodore Harrington. The man who built this hotel with his bare hands. The man whose legacy you've been managing for 3 years without ever knowing his granddaughter was watching you every single day." The gasps from the crowd were audible now. Nicole heard Mayor Richardson curse under his breath, saw Senator Davis pulling out his phone with the look of a man who needed to make some very urgent calls. But her attention remained fixed on James, watching him process the magnitude of what she was telling him. James swallowed hard, his composure cracking like ice in spring. "You're the owner." "I'm the owner," Nicole confirmed. "The anonymous investor you've been trying so hard to impress. The person whose standards you worried about meeting. The one you've been submitting quarterly reports to through lawyers while treating her granddaughter like garbage." James staggered slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady himself. Nicole watched him cycle through shock, disbelief, horror, and finally, the devastating understanding of what his cruelty had actually cost him. "Nicole, he started, but she held up a hand to stop him. "For 2 years and 4 months, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, "I've watched you run my grandfather's hotel. I've seen your competence and your cruelty, your intelligence and your arrogance. I've witnessed you at your best and your absolute worst." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room like judgment. I could have revealed myself at any time. Could have fired you, sued you, destroyed your career with a phone call. But I wanted to understand what kind of man you really were when you thought no one important was watching. James's face crumpled. The things I said, the way I treated you. The way you treated someone you thought was powerless, Nicole corrected. Someone you thought didn't matter. Someone whose pain was entertainment for your guests. Around them, Charleston's elite shifted uncomfortably, recognizing themselves in her words. The laughter that had greeted James's cruel jokes about disciplining the housekeeping staff now felt obscene in retrospect. Nicole reached up to unclasp the gold locket at her throat, the one that had hidden her grandfather's photo and the deed to the Grand Heritage Hotel for over 2 years. She held it up so the light caught the engraved inscription. To Nicole, you were born worthy. Love, Granddaddy. My grandfather left me this hotel because he believed I could honor his legacy and make it better, she said. But he also believed that people deserved second chances, that kindness could transform hearts that seemed beyond redemption. She looked directly at James, who was staring at her with an expression of complete devastation. The question now, Nicole said, her voice soft but implacable, is whether you're the man my grandfather hoped you could become, or the man you've shown me you are. The choice hung in the air between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. The silence stretched for an eternity before James Wellington, former general manager of the Grand Heritage Hotel, dropped to his knees among the broken glass. Not in a theatrical gesture of supplication, but in the way a man collapses when the weight of his own cruelty becomes too heavy to bear standing. His shoulders shook as the full magnitude of his actions crashed over him like a wave. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words barely audible above the shocked murmurs of Charleston's elite. Nicole, I'm so sorry. But Nicole was no longer looking at James. Her gaze swept across the ballroom, taking in the faces of people who had laughed at her humiliation just minutes before. Mayor Richardson avoided her eyes. Senator Davis was already backing toward the exit. The society wives who had dismissed her with casual cruelty suddenly found urgent reasons to study their champagne glasses. You know what's interesting? Nicole said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. For 2 years, I've served you all. I've cleaned your rooms, brought you fresh towels, listened to your complaints about thread counts and water temperature. And not one of you, not one, ever saw me as a person worth knowing. She walked slowly through the crowd, her server's uniform somehow transformed into a robe of dignity by the force of her presence. You made assumptions about my worth based on my job, my uniform, the color of my skin. You laughed when Mr. Wellington humiliated me because it confirmed your belief that some people simply don't matter. Mayor Richardson's wife shifted uncomfortably. Now see here, young lady. Ms. Harrington, Nicole corrected with quiet authority. And you'll address me properly, Mrs. Richardson, just as you would any other property owner in Charleston's historic district. The correction landed like a slap. Around the room, Nicole could see the recalculations beginning, political, social, financial. She was no longer the invisible servant girl, but a young black woman who owned one of Charleston's most prestigious hotels, who could influence elections and business deals, who demanded the respect they'd never thought to offer. My grandfather built this hotel as proof that excellence has no color, Nicole continued. He wanted to create a place where dignity was the only currency that mattered. Instead, I've watched it become a stage for cruelty and condescension. She turned back to James, who had risen to his feet, his face streaked with tears and shame. But he also believed in redemption, in the possibility that people could choose to be better than their worst moments. James met her eyes with effort. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, you don't, Nicole agreed. But my grandfather didn't build this place for people who deserved it. He built it for people who needed it. A second chance, a place to prove themselves, an opportunity to be more than their circumstances suggested. She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, crisp and white with gold lettering. Nicole Harrington, owner and CEO, Grand Heritage Hotel. Mr. Wellington, she said formally, extending the card to him. I'm offering you a choice. You can resign tonight with a generous severance package and excellent references. Walk away from this moment and rebuild your career somewhere else, hopefully as a better man than you've been here. James took the card with trembling hands. Or you can stay and help me transform this place into what my grandfather envisioned. Not as general manager, that position is no longer available, but as someone who understands both the cost of cruelty and the value of redemption. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Around them, the crowd watched with fascination and discomfort, witnessing a grace they weren't sure they would have been capable of offering. James looked down at the business card, then back at Nicole's face. Why would you give me that chance? Because 3 days ago, you worked beside me as an equal. You showed me the man my grandfather thought you could become. And because the choice to be better has to be yours, I can't make it for you. James was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, he spoke, his voice stronger than it had been all evening. I'd like to try. To be the man your grandfather believed I could be. To earn the respect I demanded instead of assuming I deserved it. Nicole nodded slowly. Then we'll start Monday morning. And Mr. Wellington? The first thing we're going to do is review every employee in this hotel and make sure they're being treated with the dignity every human being deserves. Yes, ma'am, James said, and for the first time, the respect in his voice was genuine. Nicole turned to address the room one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Grand Heritage Hotel will continue to serve Charleston's finest. But it will do so while treating every person who walks through these doors, guest, employee, or visitor, with equal dignity and respect. Those who can't abide by that standard are welcome to take their business elsewhere. The message was clear. The rules had changed, and so had the person making them. As the crowd began to disperse, some in embarrassed silence, others in urgent whispered conversations about the implications of this revelation, Nicole walked to the portrait of her grandfather hanging in the third-floor hallway. I think I'm ready now, Granddaddy, she whispered, touching the locket at her throat. Ready to honor your legacy and make it my own. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Maria appeared at her shoulder, no longer in a server's uniform, but in an elegant dress Nicole had never seen before. I knew, Maria said simply. Maybe not the details, but I knew you were special. I knew you belonged here. Nicole smiled through her tears. I was so afraid of not being worthy of his trust. Mija, Maria said, her voice warm with maternal love, you were never the one who needed to prove anything. You were already exactly who you were meant to be. As the grandfather clock chimed midnight, marking the end of the hometown hero's celebration and the beginning of Nicole's true inheritance, she finally understood what her grandfather had been trying to tell her. She hadn't needed to hide to earn her place. She had always belonged here. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't conquering your enemies, but discovering you had the strength to change them, and yourself, all along. What would you do if you had the power to transform someone who had hurt you?